Hello, my name is Savannah. My movie that I chose to analyze and give a presentation about is the movie called Grave Encounters. It was made in 2011, and I chose this movie because I have not been able to watch it fully through. I have began watching it, and I've watched like all of the key parts, but something about this movie just really freaks me out. It's a very it's not super gory. Like I went to see like the Terrifier movie and that's gory. This is more I don't even know how to explain it. I feel like me explaining the movie itself will explain what I mean. So, just getting right into it as an introduction. Again, the film I chose to give my presentation about is called Grave Encounters. It was directed by Colin Minihan and Stuart Ortiz. Just as an overview, a TV ghost hunting crew. It is five people in total. It was a 5-man crew, one woman, 4 men. They went into this abandoned hospital. It was called Collingwood Psychiatric Hospital. To conduct an investigation. The group itself was a very non-believing group. They were very skeptical, so they just wanted to go and see what it was about, see if they could catch anything, see if everyone was lying, see for themselves. The hospital itself was known highly for its paranormal activity, but specifically because of what happened back when the hospital was running. Also specifically, the actions of one doctor, Dr. Arthur Friedman, who conducted many, many, many unethical experiments and lobotomies. Specifically, lobotomies are what has gotten him his name, as it is thought that he conducted these lobotomies to use the bodies of those patients as some sort of paranormal ritual of a sort. So he was just a very horrible man conducting these very horrible experiments to these helpless individuals, really, because when you entered this hospital as a patient, it was a trap. You would go in and you don't leave unless you die or you get a lobotomy and you're fixed, per se. To talk about the crew, the 5-person crew that went into the hospital, it was led by the crew host Lance. Then there was the occult specialist Sasha, the cameraman TC, the surveillance operator Matt, and the fake medium Houston. These 5 together were they seemed like a close group. They were really not expecting any of this to happen, and I feel like that's where most of the suspense happens in the beginning of the movie. They treated it as such a joke. Like nothing was going to happen. Whatever would happen would be fake or meaningless per se. So they weren't expecting anything horrible by any means to happen to them at all. And none of them made it out alive. Possibly from my understanding, Lance did not make it out alive, but I could be incorrect on that. I was a little confused because I haven't been able to fully watch it. But even watching it, the movie ends. I don't want to spoil it, but it just ends in one scene. It doesn't clarify whether or not Lance passes away or not. But everyone else does pass away. I would say probably all tragic deaths. 2 people disappear with no trace, but I can only imagine what was done to them by these ghosts and paranormal figures. So I would say they all suffered. They all just suffered. They all, as I was saying, met a very unfortunate demise. The very first to pass away was Houston. It was him, Sasha, and it was another one of the men. And they were frightened by a noise that happened in the hospital, and they separated. Houston got separated from the group. While he was trying to find the group, he was exploring this hallway. He wasn't anywhere near anybody, actually. He was lifted off the ground by no force. There was no hands, no shadow, no anything. He was just lifted off the ground and strangled, but not to death, nearly to death, until he was thrown across the room. There's that big like shine of light, and then he was thrown across the room and he died. Second was Matt. He disappeared. He was the first to disappear, but the second to die. He disappeared early on in the movie, going to locate, I think it was more cameras, and he didn't return until later on in the movie, and he had gone mentally insane, and he was in a patient gown. And it is known that if you have a patient gown or patient ID or bracelet on you, you are locked into the hospital, per se. Later in the movie, so he disappears in the beginning. He comes back, I would say, towards the middle, and then shortly after that, he throws himself down an elevator shaft, instantly killing himself. The third to go was TC. He was the cameraman. Him and Matt, and maybe Lance went into a bathroom. They found a bloody tub where TC was standing next to it, and a deranged, a demonically deformed woman appeared from the bloody tub and dragged him under with no trace after that. He was submerged by the blood and was never to be seen again. Which, we're going to talk about that later because that is such an interesting moment. Next to sadly pass was Sasha. She became increasingly ill throughout the night. She was very sick, very run down, coughing up blood, thing of the sort. And then as her and Lance were down in the hallway in the basement trying to find an escape, a supernatural mist appeared and she disappeared with no trace left behind, which left Lance by himself in this long hallway. They said that they walked the hallway together for over a day, and there was nothing. It was just straight hallway for over a day. The hospital itself was able to change its walls and make it so you can never leave the hospital. I'll talk about that later on. As they were investigating in the hospital, they would try to find emergency exits, fire exits, anything, but the walls can move themselves to keep everyone trapped in, so they were unable to leave. While Lance did last in the hallway, he ended up going mentally insane while being stuck in the hallway. And he walked into the hallway, finally found a door, and it was unfortunately Dr. Friedman's laboratory where he was then lobotomized. And the movie ends with the lobotomized footage of Lance saying that he can finally leave because he was fixed. To discuss the equipment that was used, they used equipment. They used lots of cameras, but they didn't use very many paranormal detectors. The only two of the sort were the night vision cameras and the EVP. The EVP picked up lots of voices and noises throughout the night, as well as the night vision camera was able to pick up some things that were unable to be seen by the human eye, as well as we could see Sasha's hair getting pulled through film, and then it was able to show ghostly faces with the demonically distorted features, one of which, I don't know if I can go back, was this photo right here. This was caught on a night vision camera by Lance. That is Dr. Friedman. Sorry, going back to this slide, another one of the main pieces of equipment they used throughout the entire film actually was the static surveillance cameras. When they first got to the hospital, they put these cameras all around the hospital to be able to watch what was going on. And it picked up quite a few things: doors slamming, wheelchairs moving, even a window opening by itself with nobody nearby. These were very interesting scenarios. The final thing I'd like to discuss are the key, in my opinion, the key moments in the films, which for me were just the most frightening, the most fear-instilling moments throughout the film. First would be, these are not like ranked at all, but one of the moments was when the hospital bracelets appeared on the crew members' hands, dictating that they were stuck in the hospital. They had encountered a fright and were attacked, and they went to hide in a closet, and when they woke up, they had the hospital ID bracelets on them, meaning they were officially stuck forever in this hospital. Second was the blood-filled bathtub really got me. That was just so horrifying to see. They walked into this bathroom, and that tub, that is so much blood to be. The bathtub is filled to the point where when that woman drugged Matt into the tub, it overflowed, spilling blood onto the ground. That was just so. It was just shocking to see, honestly. Second was Houston being attacked. This sort of confused me in a way. I'd say it only confuses me because I'm still a believer, non-believer. I believe, but I think I would believe more if I encountered these things myself and was able to make my own conclusions. And I think Houston being completely lifted, this grown man being completely lifted off the ground by his neck, by his shirt collar and his neck. By there's no shadow, there's no ghost, there's no shimmer of light anywhere, nothing. And then for him to be thrown across the room like that with that big bang of light, it's just it was very interesting to watch. I think it really plays into the skepticism throughout the movie, showing like such not a silly scenario, but it's an unexplainable scenario. Another two moments where was Matt jumping down the elevator. I couldn't get a picture of this, obviously, for the fact that he had jumped down an elevator, but watching that scene, he walked into the elevator shaft. So you have the elevator doors, and they were open, and he was just standing in the doorway. And he took a camera. He had a camera in his hand, filming like his point of view. And he dove head first into this elevator shaft, killing himself. I think that was such an amazing way to foreshadow the hospital itself, because it was said in the beginning by Matt himself, I believe, that the only way you leave the hospital is if you are lobotomized or if you die. And then him killing himself, I think, is just a really huge foreshadowing event that some may overlook. And then finally was Lance being lobotomized in the basement. This was incredibly horrifying to watch. I watched the scene, and it was very scary. I think the film itself isn't a very horrifying film, but I think all of these events back to back to back give it the horrifying feel. This instance in particular was very horrifying. Lance was mentally drained, physically drained. He was sick, bleeding. He was deranged even, and he was wandering this hallway for over a day, probably 2 days at this point, straight walking in a long, dark corridor, only to finally find a room to be attacked and frightened by this demonically deranged Dr. Friedman. Like, you can see in this photo, it's so hard to explain him. Like, just looking at him, just looking at that figure is incredibly horrifying. And this was picked up on the night vision handheld cameras. And Lance was grabbed by this doctor and lobotomized, and the ending film, the ending scene, you can see him like slurring his words. He's a shell of a human, really. He's just a shell of a man. And I think this film was just amazing, really. I am not very big on horror films. I like ghosts themselves. I like the paranormal field. I like all the things of the sort. I love going to abandoned buildings and investigating, trying to find experiences for myself, trying to understand things for myself. And I'm not typically a fan of the horror movies. They're very dramatized, they're very drawn out, they're very unrealistic. And I think this, while it did have its unrealistic moments, was a very, very nice film, and a very horrifying film, really. And I think the use of all of those paranormal equipment really added to the effect of the film. They wouldn't have gotten nearly as many reasonings as they did, reactions as they did. They wouldn't have seen as many things as they did without the equipment. They would have heard the voices without the EVP, without the cameras even. They would have no evidence at all. This film wouldn't have even been made without the film. So I think the use of all this paranormal equipment is just stellar in my opinion. I think this was a very nice film. If only I wasn't so easily scared by horror films. There is a second movie, and I'm sure it is just as horrifying and as interesting, but I'm sure it is very horrifying. So, but in conclusion, this film was very interesting. I think the equipment itself really made the film. There would be no film without the equipment, really, especially cameras. Cameras are such a big use and help, especially when they have the audio feature too. It's one thing just to capture the picture, but to have the film, even the EVP, to correlate the EVP recordings with the camera recordings and just see the evidence that's given, see the figures, hear the voices, hear the noises, look back, see if there's any other aspects like harming and anyone, like adding to the film anything. I think that opportunity is just amazing, and I think this film was really well made, and I think everyone, if you're not easily scared, should go watch this film. But thank you for watching my presentation.